I'm Teisha Bader with the JBS News Update for Monday, June the 27th, 2016. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu arrived in Rome today and was greeted by Italian Prime Minister Matteo Renzi. Netanyahu is in the city to meet with U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry. The two addressed a press conference after their sit-down earlier today, which the Prime Minister said focused on the common threats and challenges being faced by Israel and the U.S., including the threat of ISIS. Also, security cooperation between the two countries and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and prospects for peace. In his remarks to the press, Netanyahu also announced a reconciliation deal with Turkey. Relations between Israel and Turkey have been frayed since the Mavi Marmara incident of 2010, when a Turkish flotilla, a group of ships, tried to breach Israel's naval blockade of Gaza. IDF soldiers boarded the boat that was said to hold peaceful protesters, but instead they were violently attacked by those on board. In the clashes that ensued, 10 Turkish nationals were killed and several IDF soldiers were injured. Under the deal announced today, Israel will pay $20 million in compensation for the deaths, and Turkey will not take any legal action against the soldiers. Netanyahu announced the deal today in Rome, where he said the agreement between the two countries also includes the continuation of the security blockade off the Gaza coast, which Netanyahu said was of supreme security interest to Israel.
The security naval blockade remains in place, but we do enable cargo and material and humanitarian material to come from Turkey or from any other country to Israel.
Noting that terror group Hamas runs the Gaza Strip, and any material being brought into it could be used for terror purposes against Israel. The Prime Minister also said that Turkey would do its part in preventing terror and the financing of terror. Turkey will be allowed, though, to send humanitarian aid to Gaza. Netanyahu said, quote, "We are returning to full normalization with Turkey, including a return of ambassadors, which will be implemented as soon as possible." Jewish groups here in the U.S. welcomed the restoration of ties today. The American Jewish Committee's CEO David Harris called Israel and Turkey anchors of the region and that they share common threats and concerns. Harris said, accordingly, cooperation is a far better alternative than conflict. Also welcoming the news of reconciliation with Turkey, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, who made his 11th and final visit as UN chief to Israel today. Ban was welcomed by Israeli President Reuven Rivlin. Also today, Ban received an honorary award at Tel Aviv University, where he called on the leaders of both Israel and the Palestinians to move towards restarting peace talks. He urged them to engage with the quartet, the representatives from the United Nations, the U.S., the EU, and Russia in this effort. Ban said leaders on both sides need to urgently take concrete steps to restore hope and a political horizon so that the Israeli and Palestinian people see a pathway to peace, not a quagmire of recurring violence. And Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu also spoke over the phone with U.S. Vice President Joe Biden today about the deal with Turkey. The White House released a statement saying the vice president congratulated Netanyahu on the move, noting the positive security and economic benefits for both countries and for the region. Meanwhile, the families of 2 IDF soldiers killed in Gaza, whose remains are being held by terror group Hamas, expressed their disappointment at the deal with Turkey. The families of Hadar Golden and Oron Shaul, who were killed in Gaza in 2014, had urged the Israeli government to include the return of the bodies of their fallen sons as part of the deal with Turkey. Speaker of the Knesset, Yuli Edelstein, met with the families today and told them he would speak to Prime Minister Netanyahu about the issue upon Netanyahu's return to Israel from Rome tonight. The deal with Turkey will be voted on later this week. And looking now at some other news, clashes continue today on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Masked Arab youth confronted Israeli police and security forces with rocks and fireworks for the second day in a row. Several rioters were said to have been injured in the clashes. Jerusalem police noted that there had been little incident until now during the holy Muslim month of Ramadan, which began 3 weeks ago and ends in 10 days. A statement read that the police have acted with determination and professionalism, with an increased presence in Jerusalem and the surroundings, and with a focus on the Old City and the Temple Mount, with the aim of enabling hundreds of thousands of Muslim worshippers to celebrate the holiday in Jerusalem and on the Temple Mount. The Anti-Defamation League today expressed its disappointment at several Israel-focused motions endorsed last week by the Presbyterian Church USA's General Assembly. Among them, a report calling on the church to explore alternatives to the two-state solution, and a motion regarding the BDS, Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions movement, which seeks to delegitimize the State of Israel. The ADL, however, also praised efforts by grassroots clergy and lay people who introduced amendments at the Assembly that reaffirmed the Church's support for the Jewish right to self-determination and that the Church, quote, stands with the people of Israel, affirming their right to exist as a sovereign nation, just as they affirm such rights for the Palestinians. And taking a look now at our programming for tonight on JBS from Monday, June the 27th. At 7:15, Shachar Azani, who heads the Northeast region of Stand With Us, talks about the BDS movement and how it is an expression of the new anti-Semitism from the JCC of Stamford. At 8 o'clock, author Daniel Goldhagen talks about the resurgence of anti-Semitism across the world and why it recurs throughout history, from JBS's coverage of the Conference on Global Anti-Semitism at Kean University. And at 10, former Chief Rabbi of Great Britain, Lord Jonathan Sacks, talks about the essence of Jewish identity from the 92nd Street Y in New York City. And coming up tonight, right after this newscast at 6:30, it's In the News with Mark Golub, who is joined by Rabbi Barry Marcus, who talks about the Jewish community, theirs reaction to Great Britain's decision to leave the EU. And that's the JBS News Update for Monday, June the 27th, 2016. I'm Teisha Bader.